Dan Bilzerian is one of the most recognizable and controversial personalities of the internet age. To some people, he represents ultimate freedom. To others, he is the symbol of excess, ego, and modern celebrity culture. Few individuals have built such a powerful personal brand from controversy alone. Whether admired or criticized, one thing is certain: Dan Bilzerian transformed himself from the son of a wealthy and controversial businessman into one of the most talked-about men on the planet. Daniel Brandon Bilzerian was born on December 7, 1980, in Tampa, Florida. He grew up in a family that was already surrounded by wealth, ambition, and controversy. His father, Paul Bilzerian, was a famous corporate raider during the 1980s. Known for making aggressive business deals and later becoming involved in legal battles with the US government. Throughout Dan's life, the shadow of his father's success and controversies would follow him everywhere. Many people would later question whether Dan's fortune was truly self-made or inherited from the family wealth. Dan grew up with advantages that most people never experience, yet his childhood was not as glamorous as many assume. He has spoken in interviews about feeling isolated and often struggling to fit in. The enormous wealth of his family did not automatically provide happiness or stability. Instead, it created expectations and pressures that shaped his personality. As a young man, Dan developed a fascination with competition, risk, adventure, and proving himself. This desire pushed him toward one of the toughest military paths available. He enlisted in the United States Navy and entered the highly demanding BUD/S training program, the gateway to becoming a Navy SEAL. Very few candidates survived the training. Dan made multiple attempts, but ultimately never became a Navy SEAL. Reports indicate he was removed before completion due to safety-related issues during training. For many people, this would have been a devastating setback, but failure became a recurring theme in Dan Bilzerian's life. Instead of allowing setbacks to define him, he continuously reinvented himself. After leaving military training, he attended the University of Florida, where he studied business and criminology. However, traditional education never truly captured his attention. He was attracted to higher risks and larger rewards. Before long, poker entered the picture. Poker would become one of the foundations of his public identity. Dan has long claimed that he earned tens of millions of dollars playing private high-stakes poker games against wealthy businessmen and billionaires. Critics question the scale of these claims, because his official tournament results are relatively modest compared to the legends of professional poker. His best-known tournament result came at the 2009 World Series of Poker main event. Nevertheless, several respected poker players have acknowledged that Bilzerian participated in extremely large private games where enormous sums changed hands. Whether every claim is true or exaggerated remains debated, but the poker narrative served an important purpose. It helped establish Dan as a man who embraced risk rather than avoiding it. He cultivated an image of someone willing to gamble everything and walk away victorious. Then something happened that changed his life forever. Social media exploded. While many people used Instagram to share ordinary moments, Dan recognized its power before most others did. He understood that attention had become a new currency. Instead of presenting himself as a normal person, he created a larger-than-life character. Private jets, luxury yachts, weapons, exotic cars, massive mansions, beautiful women, extreme adventures. Every image reinforced the same message. Dan Bilzerian was living a life beyond the imagination of ordinary people. The strategy worked. Millions began following him. Then tens of millions. Eventually, he became known worldwide as the King of Instagram. His account grew into one of the largest personal brands on the platform, attracting more than 30 million followers. What made Bilzerian different from many celebrities was that he wasn't famous because of movies, music, or sports. He became famous for his lifestyle itself. He transformed his existence into a product. People were not simply following Dan Bilzerian. They were following an idea, the fantasy of unlimited freedom, the fantasy of doing whatever you want, the fantasy of escaping ordinary life. This was the true genius behind his success. Many influencers show luxury. Dan turned luxury into mythology. As his popularity exploded, he expanded into business. The most famous of his ventures became Ignite, a lifestyle company connected to vaping products, CBD, alcohol, supplements, and various lifestyle goods. The company was designed to monetize the image that Bilzerian had spent years building. His personal brand and the company became almost inseparable. However, success brought new controversies. Questions about Ignite's finances emerged. Questions about executive spending emerged. Questions about the origins of Bilzerian's wealth continued to follow him. In later years, legal battles involving Ignite and his family created headlines. Dan eventually found himself in disputes involving the company he helped build, and even legal conflicts connected to his father. Yet, controversy has always functioned like fuel for Bilzerian. The more critics attacked him, the more attention he received. And in the social media era, attention often translates into power. One of the most fascinating aspects of Dan Bilzerian's story is that many people misunderstand what made him successful. It wasn't poker, it wasn't business, it wasn't even money, it was narrative control. Dan understood that modern society is built on stories. People follow stories. People buy stories. People dream through stories. He became the central character of one of the largest personal myths ever created on social media. Whether the myth was entirely real became almost irrelevant. The myth itself generated value. Over time, however, cracks began to appear in the image. As he entered his 40s, Bilzerian started speaking differently. The endless parties, the endless women, the endless luxury. They no longer seemed to satisfy him in the same way. In interviews, he occasionally admitted that pure hedonism had limitations. The lifestyle that millions envied did not necessarily provide lasting fulfillment. This realization surprised many people, because Dan Bilzerian had become one of the greatest symbols of modern pleasure culture. Yet even he seemed to acknowledge that unlimited indulgence does not automatically create meaning. This may ultimately become one of the most important lessons of his story. People often see the mansion, they see the yacht, they see the private jet, but they rarely ask what happens after obtaining those things. Bilzerian reached a level of material success that most people only dream about. Yet the search for purpose did not disappear. In terms of religion and spiritual beliefs, Dan Bilzerian has never positioned himself as a deeply religious figure. Throughout his public life, he has generally presented himself as skeptical of organized institutions and more focused on personal freedom, self-interest, and individual experience than traditional religious doctrine. His worldview has typically reflected personal sovereignty rather than devotion to a specific faith tradition. While he occasionally discusses morality, society, politics, and culture, he is better described as a secular individualist than a religious leader or ideological activist. His Armenian heritage connects him historically to one of the world's oldest Christian cultures. But religion has never been a defining feature of his public identity. As the years passed, Bilzerian continued evolving. He became increasingly vocal about politics. He criticized governments. He commented on international affairs. He expressed controversial opinions that generated both support and backlash. Some viewed him as a truth teller. Others viewed him as an attention seeker. But regardless of opinion, people continued listening. That ability to command attention remains one of his greatest assets. Recently, Bilzerian has even explored direct political involvement, signaling ambitions that extend far beyond social media influence. This demonstrates that he does not view himself merely as an entertainer. He increasingly appears interested in shaping public conversations and political debates. What makes Dan Bilzerian such a fascinating figure is not simply his wealth or fame. It is what he represents. To supporters, he represents rebellion against limitations. A man who ignored conventional rules. A man who built a life on his own terms. A man who pursued freedom without apology. To critics, he represents excess. A culture obsessed with image. A society that rewards spectacle over substance. A world where attention can become more valuable than achievement. Both interpretations contain elements of truth. And perhaps that is why Dan Bilzerian remains relevant. He functions as a mirror. People project their own beliefs onto him. Some see success. Some see emptiness. Some see courage. Some see narcissism. But everyone sees something. Very few public figures create such strong reactions. As of today, Dan Bilzerian remains one of the most recognizable internet personalities of the modern era. His story continues to evolve, but his legacy is already secure. He demonstrated that in the digital age, personal branding can become more powerful than traditional fame. He showed that attention itself can be transformed into wealth, influence, and opportunity. He turned social media into a stage and made himself the main character. Whether history ultimately remembers him as a poker player, entrepreneur, influencer, businessman, celebrity, provocateur, or cultural phenomenon remains uncertain. But perhaps the most accurate description is simpler. Dan Bilzerian became one of the first men to fully understand the rules of the attention economy. Long before most people realized what social media would become, he understood that the modern world rewards visibility. And he mastered visibility better than almost anyone. Love him or hate him, that achievement cannot be denied. His story is ultimately not just about money, women, poker, or luxury. It is about the creation of a modern myth. A myth built in real time, before the eyes of millions. And whether that myth was entirely true may matter far less than the fact that the world believed it.